Ethan Ward sat across from Laura Benton and Troy Ramirez in the narrow glass conference room at Vertex Dynamics, watching their staged expressions of regret flicker under the harsh fluorescent lights. The manila folder on the table between them said everything before Laura even opened her mouth. Ethan, after 17 years of dedicated service, Vertex is moving in a new direction, she said, her voice thick with forced sincerity. Troy, the HR manager, nodded along, trying to look somber. Ethan didn't speak. He let the silence do the heavy lifting. Today was no surprise. He had known this moment was coming. 2 weeks ago, a misfired internal email had landed in Ethan's inbox, detailing plans to refresh senior staff by shedding anyone over 45 without a clear innovation pipeline. He had printed the memo, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his home safe. That night, he'd circled today's date on his office calendar, a small act of quiet rebellion. Now, as Laura slid the severance folder toward him, 1.5 weeks per year, 2 months health coverage, Ethan accepted it with a polite smile. He knew their script better than they did. Troy began reciting the checklist. Return company laptop, badge, and phone by Friday. Keycard access would be shut off by end of day. Ethan nodded automatically, already mentally checked out. They didn't know that he'd spent the last 3 months working nights on his own laptop, perfecting the next generation load balancing engine Vertex desperately needed. They didn't know he had a signed offer from Novacore Systems waiting in his inbox. Laura was still talking about next steps and transition support, but Ethan was already picturing the press release. He stood smoothly, extending his hand to each of them with a steady, measured calm. "I understand completely," he said, his voice free of bitterness. Laura looked faintly disappointed, as if she had hoped for something messier. As Ethan left the conference room, the Seattle rain pressed against the glass walls like restless ghosts. By Monday, that same conference room would host a very different kind of meeting, one filled with executives scrambling to understand how they had let their future walk right out the door without a fight. Ethan hadn't always been an outsider at Vertex Dynamics. 17 years ago, he was one of the rising stars, hired straight out of graduate school for his expertise in distributed systems. In those early days, he'd spent nights camped out in server rooms, sketching load distribution models on whiteboards, and pushing software builds at 2 a.m. His breakthrough, a dynamic load balancing algorithm that could predict and adjust to real-time data flow, had turned Vertex from a struggling analytics firm into an industry heavyweight. He was young then and naive enough to think innovation alone would protect. Over time, Ethan watched the company change. Vertex got sleeker, richer, and more political. It wasn't the best ideas that got attention. It was the loudest voices in the boardroom. Ethan's work still powered the worse. They saw experience as a liability. His colleagues who questioned flashy shortcuts were quietly pushed aside. Ethan realized that no matter how good his work was, he was one reorganization away from being expendable. The final warning sign came 6 months ago during a quarterly strategy session. Vertex new CEO, David Kwan, unveiled a plan for a next-gen systems initiative that leaned heavily on Ethan's load balancing concepts, but didn't mention Ethan once. A pit formed in his stomach that day, but he kept his expression blank. When he checked the patent registry out of instinct, what he found stunned him. Vertex had never properly filed the full patent for the second-generation improvements he'd developed 5 years earlier. It was listed internally, but unprotected. He understood immediately. They planned to phase him out and claim the tech. That night, he started working in secret. Using his own equipment outside of company hours, Ethan refined the algorithm beyond anything Vertex had seen, boosting efficiency by 38% and adding predictive self-healing functions. Every line of code was time-stamped, every session logged, every improvement carefully documented. Within 2 months, by the time Vertex delivered their severance speech, Ethan had already secured his future and quietly prepared a trap that would soon snap shut on the very people who thought they could erase him. Ethan left Vertex Dynamics without looking back. He dropped his company badge, laptop, and phone at the security desk, carrying only a cardboard box with a few personal items, a framed photo of his brother, a chipped coffee mug from his first product launch, and a small stack of old engineering notebooks. The rain hit harder as he stepped into the parking garage. His personal phone buzzed just as he closed the car door. All set for tomorrow? Welcome aboard. He smiled for the first time all day. That night, in his apartment overlooking Lake Union, Ethan reviewed the final paperwork NovaCore's lawyers had sent. His new title, Chief Systems Officer. His compensation, a high 6-figure salary, substantial equity, and royalties from every product built with his patented algorithm. The severance pittance Vertex had offered already felt laughable. More importantly, NovaCore had given him something Vertex never truly had: real authority over the future direction of their core technology. At 7:30 the next morning, a black sedan pulled up outside his building to take him to NovaCore's headquarters. Ethan closed his laptop, ready. The NovaCore office was sharp, efficient, humming with a focused energy Vertex had long since lost. Isabella greeted him personally, leading him through a back corridor to a private executive suite. They shook hands over the signed agreement, a sense of mutual understanding between them. "You're not just joining us," she said. "You're shaping our next 10 years. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of it and the freedom. Meanwhile, across town at Vertex, the senior leadership team was just starting to realize their Monday wasn't going to go anything like they had planned. Later that evening, Ethan met Isabella Cross for dinner at a quiet restaurant tucked away in the Presidio district. The place was discreet, no chance of running into anyone from Vertex, with high-backed leather booths and candlelit tables. Isabella had reserved a private room at the back, separated by heavy velvet curtains. She greeted Ethan with an easy handshake and a glass of scotch, already waiting. "We like to keep our conversations unobserved," she said with a half-smile. Ethan appreciated the subtlety. After all, what they were finalizing tonight would reshape the industry within days. The folder Isabella slid across the table was thick, but Ethan had already reviewed the essentials. NovaCore wasn't just licensing his patent. They were investing in it as the centerpiece of their future data platform. His royalty percentage would grow as adoption increased, and his equity would vest aggressively over the next 4 years. "We believe in building around builders, discarding them when it's convenient." Ethan flipped through the signature pages calmly, every major term circled and initialed. It wasn't just a good deal, it was recognition, the kind Vertex had never offered. After signing the final page, Ethan leaned back and exhaled slowly, feeling the tension of the past few months finally loosen. Isabella raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said. Ethan clinked his glass lightly against hers. "To taking back what's ours," he replied, his voice steady. Across town, he imagined Vertex executives, clinking glasses of their own, still smug, still unaware that tomorrow's news cycle would hit them like a punch to the throat. For the first time in years, Ethan felt not just smart, but powerful. And this time, he intended to stay in control. At 7 o'clock, i.e. man sharp, the next morning, the press release hit the wire. NovaCore Systems acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary load balancing patent. Ethan Ward named Chief Systems Officer. The headline dominated the major tech news feeds within minutes. Inside Vertex Dynamics' sleek downtown office, the Monday leadership meeting froze mid-sentence as David Kwan's executive assistant rushed in. One by one, Senior executives opened the announcement on their tablets. The room fell silent, then erupted into frantic, overlapping conversations. David slammed his coffee cup down so hard it cracked. "Get legal on the phone. Now." By 8:00 a.m. panic was seeping through every floor of Vertex. Department heads demanded emergency meetings. Engineers whispered in hallways. Several team leaders immediately recognized the danger. Without Ethan's updated load balancing engine, Vertex's flagship products would stagnate within a year. Worse, clients who had already been promised next-gen updates are now legally required to license Ethan's technology from Novacore or risk loss. Miguel Chen, Ethan's former lead developer, texted him a simple message. "It's a full meltdown here. Quan looks like he's aged 10 years in an hour." Ethan smiled as he read it. Legal's early review only confirmed the nightmare. Ethan's independent patent was airtight. The documentation trail proved he had worked outside of company resources and time. There was no way to claim Vertex ownership without committing perjury. "How did this happen?" David demanded, pacing the executive conference room, voice rising in desperation. No one had a good answer. Laura Benton offered a weak defense about oversight, but it was obvious now. Their arrogance had blinded them. They thought they could discard Ethan without consequence, and now their billion-dollar roadmap depended on technology they no longer controlled. By 10:00 IEM medium, Vertex's general counsel recommended immediate damage control, reach out to Ethan, attempt to negotiate licensing terms quietly before shareholders learned the full scope, but it was already too late. The stock had begun a steady slide by mid-morning, and rumors were flying through investor circles. Analysts started asking sharp questions about intellectual property risks during earnings calls. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan was sitting comfortably in his new Novacore office, coffee in hand, watching the headlines roll across his laptop. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel pity. All he felt was justice. Ethan wasted no time assembling his new team at Novacore. Within a week, 4 of his former colleagues from Vertex, Miguel Chen, Priya Das, Logan Patel, and Ava Martinez, accepted his offer to join. They brought not just technical expertise, but deep institutional knowledge of the flaws Ethan had long wanted to fix. Novacore's executive team welcomed them with generous titles, serious salaries, and something even rarer, real authority. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't fighting uphill to get good ideas heard. Here, innovation wasn't a buzzword for marketing decks, it was the mission. The first project Ethan launched was ambitious, a complete rebuild of Novacore's data infrastructure around his new load balancing engine. The early internal tests were promising. Initial results showed a 45% performance increase compared to industry standards, with significantly lower energy usage and downtime. Word began leaking into the tech community about the Novacore jump, and clients started reaching out even before formal marketing campaigns began. Ethan's approach to leadership was simple: trust the experts, demand rigor, and protect the integrity of the work. It was a radical departure from the culture he'd left behind at Vertex. Inside the lab spaces, the energy was electric. Every engineer, from new hires to old veterans, understood they were building something foundational. Ethan instituted weekly technical demos, not for executives, but for engineers to share real findings with each other. Bureaucratic bottlenecks vanished. When challenges arose, solutions were fast and collaborative. "This is what it's supposed to feel like," Priya said one afternoon after a particularly tough but rewarding design sprint. Ethan just nodded. No need for speeches. Everyone felt it. They were part of something real, something that respected skill over politics. By the end of the second month, Novacore's internal benchmarks exceeded even Ethan's original projections. Isabella Cross dropped by the engineering floor one evening with 2 bottles of champagne. "First milestone," she said, raising a glass. And from what I hear, she added with a sly grin, our friends across town are still trying to figure out how to reboot without you. Ethan smiled politely but said nothing. He knew better than anyone you can't rebuild a future with the same broken mindset that led to failure. And Vertex Dynamics was about to learn that the hard way. It didn't take long for Vertex Dynamics to lash out. Barely 3 weeks after the NovaCore announcement, Ethan received a thick packet delivered to his new office, a formal cease and desist letter from Vertex legal department. The letter accused him of misappropriating proprietary technology and violating intellectual property agreements. Ethan didn't even flinch. He forwarded the documents to NovaCore's legal team, who had been preparing for exactly this move. Within hours, their response went back, firm, detailed, and devastating. Ethan's timestamps, independent development logs, and personal equipment records were ironclad. Vertex didn't have a legal foothold. The lawsuit threat fizzled almost as soon as it surfaced. Legal analysts, after reviewing the filings, quickly predicted Vertex had no realistic chance of winning, and any aggressive action could backfire by exposing their internal failures to the public. Quietly, Vertex withdrew the letter, pretending it had been a miscommunication, but the damage was already done. Industry insiders took notice. It became clear to clients and competitors alike that Vertex Dynamics was flailing, trying to reclaim ground they had willingly abandoned. Internally, the Vertex board grew restless, demanding answers from a visibly rattled David Kwan. At NovaCore, the incident barely registered as a speed bump. Ethan remained focused on delivering results, not playing courtroom games. They're still in denial, Isabella said during a leadership huddle, still convinced they can strong-arm their way back to relevance. Ethan agreed. Trying to bully their way out of a strategic disaster wasn't just foolish, it was predictable. The real victory wouldn't come from winning legal battles, it would come from building something so much better that Vertex Dynamics would be left behind, watching helplessly as the future moved on without them. By the end of the second quarter, the industry shift was undeniable. NovaCore Systems, once seen as a solid but second-tier player, was now the company everyone was watching. The first products built on Ethan's patented engine rolled out ahead of schedule, faster, more stable, and more efficient than anything on the market. Tech reviewers raved about the performance gains, and major enterprise clients began signing new contracts. NovaCore's stock rose steadily, up 10% over 2 months, while Vertex Dynamics saw a corresponding 18% decline. Shareholders were starting to ask uncomfortable questions at quarterly calls. Inside Vertex, chaos simmered just beneath the surface. David Kwan tried to spin the losses as short-term market fluctuations, but few believed him. Several major clients, including 2 Fortune 500 firms, announced they were transitioning to NovaCore platforms, citing concerns about technological uncertainty. Even more damning, Vertex internal engineering teams leaked word that rebuilding a replacement engine could take 2 years and cost tens of millions. There was no quick fix. David's promises that Vertex could replicate or surpass NovaCore's capabilities rang hollow with each missed product milestone. Meanwhile, NovaCore didn't slow down. Ethan led bi-weekly innovation demos streamed to key clients, showcasing not just what they had built, but what was coming next. The roadmap was aggressive: modular scalability, AI-enhanced load predictions, seamless cloud migration tools, and every step was already in motion. Industry analysts began openly questioning whether Vertex Dynamics could survive without a merger or major leadership change. Blog posts and articles with headlines like "The Fall of a Giant" and "How NovaCore Took the Future" started flooding tech news feeds. Ethan kept his head down, refusing interviews, letting the work speak for itself. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about gloating. It was about momentum. Ethan understood better than anyone. Success wasn't just launching one product. It was building a machine, a culture that could outthink, outdine and wean out weeks the competition. Vertex had wasted years feeding executive egos instead of investing in real innovation. Now, no amount of PR spin or desperate lawsuits could change the simple reality. The market had chosen, and it was choosing Novacore. 1 year after Ethan Ward was pushed out of Vertex Dynamics, he stood behind a podium at the Global Tech Innovation Summit preparing to deliver the keynote address. The room was packed with investors, engineers, journalists, the same people who once overlooked him when he sat quietly in the back rows at Vertex events. Now his introduction was brief but powerful. Chief Systems Officer of Novacore Systems and architect of the technology redefining enterprise data handling. The applause that followed wasn't polite or obligatory. It was real. Ethan smiled, feeling none of the old bitterness. His speech focused not on grudges, but on principles, the importance of protecting intellectual contributions, the risks of valuing marketing over real engineering, the future of sustainable innovation cultures. Without naming Vertex, he made it clear what happens when companies prioritize flash over substance. Afterward, a small line of young engineers formed near the stage. Ethan took his time with each of them. If his story could help them protect their own work, it would be worth more than any headline or bonus check. Back at Novacore headquarters, the celebration was already underway. News broke that morning. Novacore's market valuation had officially surpassed Vertex Dynamics for the first time in history. Isabella Cross personally delivered the announcement, a bottle of champagne in one hand and a framed copy of the stock report in the other. It was never about vengeance or payback. It was about something deeper, being seen, being valued, and finally putting his name and his work exactly where it belonged. The story of Ethan Ward isn't just about personal revenge. It's a lesson about value, ownership, and foresight. In industries obsessed with speed and youth, experience and innovation are often quietly dismissed. Ethan's journey shows what happens when you don't wait for recognition, but instead protect your own work, bet on yourself, and build something better. Real success isn't about clinging to broken systems. It's about creating environments where talent is respected and ideas are protected. For anyone grinding away quietly, wondering if it's worth it, document your work, protect your contributions, and never let someone else tell your story for you. In a world that often forgets who built the foundations they stand on, make sure your name is attached to your own work. If you found value in this story, like, subscribe, and share it with others who need the reminder. Your skills, your work, and your voice matter. Stay sharp, stay ready, and stay in control of your future.